Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of The Teacher's Point of View. I've got a special principal on today. He's Irfan Latif, who's obviously the principal of DLD College. Just had a brief chat with him prior to starting recording, and he's doing some incredible things at DLD. I mean, a lot of what he's doing is things that I've been preaching about, so I'm really excited to have you on, Irfan. I mean, could you just kind of, just so everyone knows who you are, could you kind of introduce yourself and your journey in education so far, please?
And it's wonderful to be here as part of the QTS podcast. Thanks very much for the invitation. Yes, I'm Irfan Latif and I'm the principal here at the award-winning DLD College London. I've been in education now for over a quarter of a century. That sounds quite grand, but yeah, I've been plying my trade now before you were born. So it's been a journey. I've spent time in a number of independent and state schools and have run departments, and I've been part of senior leadership teams, and this is my second headship now. I ran a boarding school back in Somerset, a very lovely country boarding school, every head teacher's dream. And now I'm back in the city, in the urban mix of London. And just behind me here is DLD College London, and it's a great place to be. We're a boarding school right in the heart of London, and it's great fun.
I mean, that building looks absolutely awesome, to be fair. I mean, it's obviously DLD is quite a prestigious boarding school, isn't it? I mean, it's quite sought out after by international students and some students that actually reside here in London as well, right? I mean, how difficult has it been in terms of boarding over the last 12 months?
All the work that we've been doing, and that just goes to show the great work that our boarding staff, all the staff at DLD have been doing. It has been tough, but I've been really impressed at how our house parents have adopted and adapted to this new way of working, and of course our students who have just gone on with it and displayed that real grit and determination to ensure that they continue with their education, that they continue living in a harmonious community here at DLD, and it's been wonderful to see how our students have matured over these past 12 months and how our staff have adapted to new ways of working. No one wanted this. We all were looking at ways in which we can improve boarding on a face-to-face basis, and for us to have gone into lockdown, we had to really adapt and change the way we work. When the first lockdown came, we were looking at ways in which we can interact with the community. And so we became part of the Rainbows for NHS campaign. And this was something our boarders had thought up. Our building is right opposite St. Thomas's Hospital. So they started drawing pictures and putting up thanks up on the posters up in the windows. Just to say thank you to all the NHS key workers who are working so hard in order to protect us from this pandemic. And then, of course, the new hospitals, the Nightingale hospitals were built, and this Rainbows for NHS campaign kicked off. Unfortunately, the NHS could not accept any pictures because of the infection that may spread coming from various different households. And so we stepped in and said, look, we will be happy to take those posters. And we had some 5,000 odd children, artists from around the world send in their pictures, and we displayed them. We have enough windows. We displayed them at DLD, and we were then deemed as a beacon of hope because everyone who walked past saw the messages of thanks, of well-being to those key workers. And we also had an area for Captain Tom as well. So this was a real effort by the boarding community, by our boarding staff, our boarding students, to come together and do something really positive for the community and London as a whole.
That's phenomenal, that is. I mean, obviously, NHS have been amazing this year, but actually, also, I think that the forgotten heroes sometimes are the teachers and the school staff for the remarkable work they do. I mean, they've kept the economy going in terms of allowing these key workers to go to schools. And my hat honestly goes off to the profession, because this country would have been pretty screwed without the hard work that you've done over this period. I mean, one of the key elements that you've spoken about in that was well-being, right? And well-being, I mean, Jesus Christ, after everything that's happened in the last year, I think well-being, it should be at the forefront of everyone's thoughts, right? I mean, you've obviously explained to me just before we start recording the amazing things you're doing in terms of well-being, but would you mind just sharing for the viewers what you're doing in terms of well-being?
Yeah, I mean, our raison d'etre, if you like, is all about the mental health and well-being of our students and staff. We have always said that if we remove those barriers to learning, then our students are going to achieve whatever they want to. And so back in January 2018, when I started, our focus was on ensuring the well-being and the mental health of our students and staff. So we created an award-winning well-being centre. And we appointed college counsellors, we have a life coach, and our staff now are being trained as coaches to provide that support for our students. We have some 60-odd staff now, and students and parents who are mental health first aid trained, so we can triage some of those issues and can be dealt with before it mushrooms into something that is difficult to handle. And our values of tolerance and of respect and of kindness underpin everything that we do at DLD. Yes, as a result, our results have been very, very encouraging, and we're very happy with the exam results and the destinations that our students go off to. But for me, TJ, it is all about the well-being and mental health, and more so now during this pandemic, where we've had to have periods of isolation, where we've had to socially distance, where we're social animals, we thrive on connection, that human connection, and for us that is so important. And so by building in those opportunities for well-being, for those opportunities to improve our mental health, and the strategies that we've adopted within school for our staff and students has benefited us. I have made it a point to talk to every single member of staff during this lockdown, whether they're support staff, whether they are teaching staff, to make sure that they remain connected to our community, and our community continues to remain strong. And I think through this virus that we've mutated, DLD has mutated into something stronger, which binds our community together through those values of tolerance, of respect, and of kindness. And I think that mental health and well-being needs to be promulgated through all our schools, and I know that many of my fellow head teachers are doing just that, to ensure that the mental health and well-being of their students and staff is at the top. Because seeing, TJ, how exams have been compromised, they've been cancelled, and so we know that we can put the exam grades and how those exam grades work into the hands of the professional, the true professional, the teachers, as you say, who have pivoted, who have adapted, who've been flexible over these past 12 months. And to give them the opportunity to provide those grades for our students just goes to show that the exam system as well needs rehauling, so that we can give our students the best possible chances when we are in situations such as this. And so I think things like the university process, the exams process, will all need to change in light of this pandemic and how we assess our students going forward.
Absolutely. I mean, I love everything you've just said. I'll be honest with you, Irfan. I mean, it's everything that I stand for. So, I mean, I couldn't agree with you any more than what you've just said. But I think, look, just in terms of obviously the mental health aspect, I mean, you've done it quite early. I mean, you've done it before the pandemic actually kind of came into play. And obviously we really need to look at the mental health figures and how much the UK economy spends on mental health issues every single year to know that it's a real issue, right? And obviously children don't learn when they're not there in terms of the emotional regulation. If they're not feeling up to it mentally, then they're not going to learn, right? And it's the same with teachers. If they're not happy, if they're not like pumped up, then they're not going to want to they're not going to be teaching at their best ability, are they? I mean, how have you found the results in the last 3 years since you've kind of gone on to this wellbeing model?
We've seen a significant improvement in our results. We've seen a significant uplift in where our students go. University isn't for everyone, internships, the world of work, etc. And we encourage whatever pathway our students want to go down in consultation with their parents and guardians to ensure that is the best route for them. As we said, TJ, the students need to be happy, and one size doesn't fit all. University isn't for everybody, and so in order to make sure that we have the correct pathways, we have those very important discussions with our various team leaders in school, with our various teachers, heads of faculty, directors of studies, to ensure that the right pathway is given to our students. And that works with our parents as well, and where parents are kept fully informed of what is going on. And one benefit that has come out of this pandemic is the increased interaction and engagement that we have with our parents, especially with those parents who are overseas, our international borders. By going online to have parents' evenings now, we've seen an increase of about 50% in terms of our engagement with our parents. The online parents' evening is something that I think we will continue with going forward, because it's much more flexible. It doesn't use up too much time in terms of travel, etc., etc. And we can talk to our parents as and when is necessary through video conferencing facilities such as Zoom and Teams. So I think one benefit that has come out, and there have been many other benefits, and of course there've been many disadvantages as well to the pandemic, but we've got to see some of the silver linings through this and continue to remain positive. And one of those is definitely how we can further engage with our parents through parents' evenings being online.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a trifecta, isn't it? In some respects, it's a triangle. You need the parents, you need the students, and you need the school staff to all be aligned, right? And on this vision, on this journey together, right? Yeah, exactly. I mean, people might think you're Illuminati. You might be careful, but ultimately, the idea is that you've got to bring everyone together. It's a community effort, isn't it? I mean, and I think one of the big problems, especially in state schools, and like you've kind of removed yourself from league tables because you believe in well-being and you've taken away those restrictions, right? But like obviously state schools can't do that, and there's still this massive uproar about exams and content being the be-all and end-all, not for everybody, but there are still some educators that believe like the educational content is everything, right? And they don't see. I mean, they've got pastoral teams, but actually, like the level of work that emotional intelligence coaches do with children in terms of working with trauma and helping them kind of overcome certain issues, I think it's probably a little bit unrecognized for the level of impact it can have on children's lives. Do you find that it's something that schools need to incorporate in what they're doing to make sure they are doing the best for their children?
And many schools do that. Yes, I know there is a focus on league tables and things like that, but I think the pandemic now is going to change how we look at assessment and how we look at those league tables, if those league tables will exist going forward. At DLD, it's important that we do teach our students the chemistry, the physics, the biology, etc., for wherever pathway they want to go into. And that content is important. Don't get me wrong, that academic content, that measure of how their knowledge and understanding is then translated into exams, etc., that is important. The other question is how that assessment is going to be formalized in some way post-COVID is another question, and that needs consultation and discussion with various exam boards and the government, and school leaders. But as you say, the curriculum as it stands now, how does it need to change in response to that? And you're absolutely right. Looking at elements of critical analysis, looking at elements of outdoor learning, the appreciation of the human connection, coaching, and how we go about incorporating those within our curriculum is going to be important. Employees now are going to be looking at those soft skills. Mm. How can people adapt? And they're going to be looking at those tech skills as well. Let's not kid ourselves. Before this pandemic, I thought Zoom was an ice cream. And I live my life now every day on Zoom. And so it's important that that new generation coming through does have that emotional intelligence, but they do also digital natives. I've just been signed up to Clubhouse, a new social media which I'm sure you're very au fait with, He's probably been around for ages, so sorry if I'm late to the party.
No, it's quite new, actually.
Clubhouse, a great new social media. Again, that has been developed by millennials, and it's looking at how we incorporate those tech skills now going forward into our education, and how that is going to be so important going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like the objective in some respects of education is to give children an opportunity by the time that they leave school, that they have an opportunity in life, right? And sometimes we expect children to know what career they want to go into by the time they're 16. I think that's sometimes the wrong question. I think the right question should be, what kind of person do you want to become? Like, do you want to become someone that earns loads of money? Do you want to change the world? Like, we should be asking these kind of questions so children can actually know who they are by the time they leave school, so they can make better informed decisions on what career they want to go down. I think a lot of time children don't know who they are, what kind of person they want to become, and then they're forced to make a decision on what degree to choose and what career they want to choose. And actually, we're doing them a little bit of a disservice in some respects, right? And just kind of going on to the tech point, there's so much. I mean, we look at like helping them with CVs and kind of maybe job prep, but actually, are we teaching them how to use LinkedIn? I mean, that is a mind-blowing platform that opens so many doors. Why aren't we incorporating that into our curriculum? Why aren't we kind of teaching children how to personal brand? You know, I mean, that is 21st century written all over it.
All of our year 13 students, by the time they leave, all will have a LinkedIn profile, because networking, I would not have met you if it wasn't through LinkedIn. Is so important now. And you know, jobs, future employers, the first thing they'll do is look on LinkedIn. And if you don't have that profile, if you don't have that presence, if you don't have that influence on LinkedIn, then maybe, you know, employers may not look at you. I don't know, but you know, it's important that platforms such as LinkedIn are used in the way which will allow, as you say, that personal branding. But we also need to teach our students and our children how to behave responsibly online. Now that everything has gone online, TJ, it's so important how to be safe online, how our students need to be careful of the digital footprint that they leave behind, because that could come back in 10 or 15 years' time when they're looking to move jobs and things like that. And so I think people have become more and more conscious of that and are making informed choices as to how to behave responsibly in a virtual world.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, it's so important, isn't it? I mean, even just things like teaching them, if you want to apply for Ernest Young, for example, go add the director on LinkedIn, like follow what he's doing and like understand what makes him tick or her tick, and then go and message them every day until you get a response about things that they're interested in, you know? I mean, that is how you open doors. I mean, that's how you be proactive in the 21st century, not by sending a CV that people look at GCSE and A levels, and they don't know any better if that person's going to be suitable for the job, you know?
So, and I think social media has opened up those avenues now where you can tweet the Prime Minister, you can tweet, you know, anyone who has a Twitter account. So it's, you know, people are out there, you know, making noises and campaigning for various issues. And for me, it is about giving our students a confidence, not that arrogance, DJ, but confidence to be able to do that. Many people think that if you go to public school, they go to independent school, there's a sense of arrogance about them. And, you know, our students are very well grounded. Before the pandemic, you know, we've worked very, very hard with the community. Some of our students are from privileged backgrounds, and, you know, they're working in food banks. You know, they're helping students learning how to read in their local schools, and outreach projects that we've been doing like that. So for us, it is about, as you correctly say, not what sort of career you want to go in, but what sort of person am I? And we want our students to be global and socially responsible students. One example is it was our students who campaigned for the school to become plastic free. We invited Joe Ruxton, who's a huge plastic campaigner who's worked with the likes of Sir David Attenborough and has produced award-winning films on how plastics are ruining our oceans. Came and gave an inspirational talk to our students, who then were driven by ensuring that single-use plastics were removed from our school environment, so that we could become more sustainable. And that was a great social project that our students got involved in. And I'm proud to say that we continue to remain plastic free.
Fantastic. I mean, that's it's so important, isn't it? I mean, we talk about creating a better world with love, compassion, empathy, but we don't teach it in school sometimes. I mean, we're so focused on like content and passing exams and like making sure we look good on league tables, and often don't like screw at us. But actually, like, what do we want in the world? What kind of future do we want? Because these kids are the future, right? So what world do we want them to build? And ultimately, I do question how like sometimes education is taught, if that is the kind of world we are trying to create, I mean, what do you think kind of needs to change in the way that we kind of perceive education here in the UK?
Our mission statement at DLD is developing the next generation of leaders to take their place in a challenging and diverse world. D for development, L for leadership, D for diversity. I mean, our school was founded back in 1931 by Messrs. Davis, Lang and Dick, hence why it's called DLD. But I think going into the 21st century, it is about development, it is about leadership, it is about diversity. And diversity can mean a whole load of things. Diversity within our curriculum, diversity within our community. And of course, that diversity was brought to the fore last year with the George Floyd incident and the movement that came out from it. And of course, it is about those sorts of issues which will have an impact on their lives going forward. And so it's important that our school environments allow that open discussion and don't close those down. And that's where we're going with education, I feel, TJ, is that we are becoming more receptive and more open to more ideas about how the world should be run, how the world should move forward. We've got campaigners such as Greta Thunberg, 16-year-old, talking about climate change, speaking to world leaders. For me, that is education. That is what people are going to learn. And so along with chemistry, biology, physics, I'm a chemist by trade, all of those things about networking and looking at climate change and looking at emotional intelligence, looking at critical analysis, looking at love and compassion, not only for the environment, but for whoever is in that environment, is so important going forward. And that's how our education system should reflect the changing social and economic and political needs of our country.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. I think you're doing some amazing things. I think obviously like just kind of bringing it back to, because you're doing it fantastically. I think there's so many elements that I absolutely try and encourage other school leaders to do, but there are still some that are traditionalist, right? And they still believe that you should stand at the front of the classroom, all children learn the same. I mean, what would you say to people that still believe in that way of teaching?
Each institution will have its own intrinsic values, will have its own mission statement, will have its own ways of working. But I think the pandemic will force all of us, including me, to look at how we do things going forward. And although a lot of us have been looking at how we can have a hybrid model or a blended model going forward, I think now the pandemic has accelerated those concepts in a way that we never would have expected. And I think going forward, a lot of the leaders now are going to look at how we're going to adapt to this new norm and how we are going to teach our students and what we are going to teach. And so I think, yes, there is a place, and I respect those people who want to continue with those traditions, because traditions are important. We don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Traditions are important, because who will continue with those traditions once the likes of me move on? And so those traditions are important, and we value those traditions. But we are going to have to look at ways in which we can adapt those traditions to meet the needs of the 21st century learner and the 21st century curriculum going forward.
Yeah, I agree. I mean,
because it was our students who wrote to MPs, who did all the project management and the work. We're the first school and the only school, I think, in the UK, let alone the planet, to have our speech day, the Houses of Parliament. And that was all done by the students. We have a great relationship with the Houses of Parliament because of our proximity. We have various MPs come and speak at our school, and so our students were able to go and do that. And again, that taught them about project management, talked about networking, talked about how they go about approaching people and looking to see how they can develop further. And that's a sort of education, though. There's project-based learning exercises that will become the norm as we move forward.
Yeah, I agree. I think, yeah, I mean, there'll be some, right, that won't change. I mean, some believe in what they're doing, absolutely, and they're really passionate about it. Like Catherine Burbell Singh, who's head of Michaela Community School, and she's very passionate about it. And I admire that because she absolutely believes what she does is the right thing, and she achieves fantastic results, according to league tables and Ofsted anyway. I mean, in terms of mental health, in terms of emotional intelligence, I don't know. I mean, there's no real metrics that can kind of demonstrate how we measure that, right? But I think sometimes that's the problem. I think sometimes we focus on the things that we can measure and don't focus on the things we can't measure, because it's actually more difficult to see if we're making progress. And actually, we're losing the human touch in some respects to education by doing that, I mean, children aren't numbers. They're human beings that have individual motivations and issues and trauma and whatever they've gone through. They deal with emotions differently. And when I'm a manager, I don't manage an individual, everybody the same way. I manage people as individuals. I need to know what makes people tick. I need to know what the intrinsic motivators are. I need to know what is going to get them down. And if they need to be whipped, or if they need that comfort and that support, and I think it's very important to recognize that. And for those children that may come from backgrounds where they've had broken families or disadvantaged upbringings, to paint them with the same brush or teach them in the same way that somebody that has got really supportive parents that believe in education is the be all and end all, and then you're trying to teach them the exact same way, I think is mind-blowing. I just genuinely believe that is so outdated, and I think we need to have a more student-centered approach, But yeah, I mean, is there anything that you kind of want to add to that?
No, independent schools are fortunate in the fact that they do have small classes, so we can have that personalised approach. That's why we've adopted a coaching culture now at school, so that we can coach our individual students and help them on the right pathway for their academic journeys and help them pastorally as well. And I think schools will become and gravitate more and more to that type of model where we are looking at personalized journey of each of those individual students and how we can get the best out of them. And I hope going forward, that's what we will continue to do, providing a solid foundation for them to go and change the world.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what we want, right? We want to give these children every opportunity, in the nicest way possible. I always go back to this, and I'm not trying to put this in basic form, but in some respects I am. No employer wants an average employee, right? I mean, nobody does. I mean, we want the people that are best for the job. So when we're only offering children the generic subjects that we've been teaching for such a long time, and those children that are only ever going to achieve C's, that no matter how hard they work, all we're telling them is, and this is what children feel like. They feel that it doesn't matter how hard they work, they're only ever going to be average. So they go through their life going to an average university, an average job, a 9-to-5 job, and that they hate going to. I mean, we need to do better for these children. If we want to bridge the gap between school and the workplace, we want to bridge that gap between the advantage and the disadvantage, we've got to give those children opportunities too, right? So I just really hope we can incorporate student-centered learning, help kids find their niche, their passion, and do more than just teach them content. It always drives. I understand the importance of culture and tradition and Shakespeare. We need to teach him. I get it, but we need to teach Shakespeare. I get it, but there is an element of you teach children Shakespeare, but then you expect them at 18 to leave school and vote without teaching them any politics. So, I mean, you talk about British culture, but then there's an element that you're missing. You don't teach them how to save up for a mortgage. You don't tell them how to work taxes, how interest rates work. I mean, but then you expect them to go into the real world and figure it out themselves. But you want to teach them Shakespeare for culture. I mean, it's very kind of contradictory in some respects, right? I mean, if you're going to teach culture, then teach it all,
No, I agree with you then, and lots of schools, including ours, are incorporating that into our PSHE curriculum. We call it the other subject because of the connotations that PSHE has. So we call it the other subject, and in that other subject, we talk about finance and education, financial education. That is really important. I didn't know anything about mortgages when I left school, and I had to learn it all by myself. Yeah, but we talk about mortgages, we talk about pensions, we talk about interest rates. They sit an exam at the end of that, so they have a financial qualification at the end of their studies with us. And yes, we look at ways in which we can incorporate those sort of things that are not taught part and parcel of the standard curriculum, within the other subject. And I'm grateful to the colleagues who invest all their time and resources into that to ensure that our students have a very rounded, holistic education, and that is really, really important going forward. Learning about the world, learning about politics, learning about how the world works from an economic, political, and social aspect is important for us. So, the number of clubs and societies that we have, we've been working with a group in Sweden, the Gapminder, to talk about facts as opposed to fake news, so that our students can look at ways in which they can cut through all the noise and get to the facts, and so that they are informed of the facts, so that they can make informed decisions and make coherent arguments about a particular point. And so that type of education for me actually to reach their potential.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is how we prepare kids for the real world, right? And ultimately, it begs the question: what is the purpose of education? Is it to give them the basic skills to prepare, like the basic skills for when they leave school, or is it to actually give them something to thrive in? And I like the latter, but then some people will believe the prior. But ultimately, where do you think kind of education needs to go? What does the future of education look like in the next sort of 3 to 5 years?
I think there will be a sort of blended learning approach now. I think that will happen. I think more and more schools will now adopt a sort of blended approach. I think there will be more distant learning as well. I think that will happen, and that will be more accessible now to students. And I think there's going to be more of a wider variety of opportunities for our students, especially with looking at emotional intelligence, looking at climate change, looking at those things that we talked about, and how that can be incorporated into the curriculum to ensure that our students have a well-rounded view of what is going on. And I think that is what's going to happen. And to add to that, PJ, it's going to be things like how does the university application process change? How does our modes of assessment change in terms of the exam system that we have, the inspection framework that we have? What will inspectors be looking at in terms of what makes good education? And I think all of those will help formulate what education looks like in the next 3 to 5 years. Do
league tables need to go?
Good question. Each school is different in terms of its pastoral care, in terms of its co-curricular activities, in terms of what it offers. And so it's very, very difficult to measure. And it just puts added pressure on students and staff, so thereby affecting their well-being and mental health. So personally, I would want them to be removed. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think all it does is put extra pressure on. The high stakes accountability puts extra pressure on, and all it does is hinder collaboration within the education sector. And actually, there's so many people doing so many awesome things, and I've spoken to so many. I don't understand why these amazing minds aren't working together in actually developing education and moving it forward. And I do often question why the government has power of education when there's so many amazing educators in the world that are just doing these these extraordinary things for their children. So it does beg the question what the point of league tables are. I know they were designed so parents know what school is good and all of that, but then it does beg the question, why do we have in a first world country like the UK any schools that don't meet the requirements? I mean, why aren't all schools at a certain level par in terms of the state schools? I mean, what are we paying taxes for in some respects if we're not providing all children with a good quality education? So I mean, I think that definitely needs to be looked at. But Irfan, it's been absolutely lovely to have you. I mean, just before you go, is there anything that you want to just sort of get off your chest?
Well, I have to say that Einstein said, education is what remains once we leave school. And so that has always traveled with me. So it's yes, the school, the building, the people, etc. Those are the fond memories that we will have. But it's the education that we take away with us, and how do we use that education, and what that education looks like is exactly what we've been talking about today, and how the next generation will now use that education to go and change the world in a positive way.
Absolutely. And just while we were on Albert Einstein, he also said we can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them, right? And I think Albert Einstein, he might have seemed mental at the time, but actually, I think he's just absolutely brilliant. I mean, he was far ahead of his time, in my opinion, and we can learn a lot from him. I think but I think we need to develop education in a way that is going to actually look at solving problems instead of creating them. But yeah, I think you're doing all the right things, Fan. It's been an absolute pleasure to hear that there are educators that are incorporating traditional and the 21st century and looking at the well-being of staff, students. I mean, it's everything I like to hear, and hopefully it's the future of our education system here in the UK and around the world. But yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure having you, and for everyone that's listening and watching, thanks for watching.
Thank you very much, DJ, and I appreciate the opportunity, and I wish all of you, your family, and all our listeners good mental health.
Thank you.